So do we keep our cameras on? Like, and then
Hello, just checking the audio. I think we are live now. Rhythm, can you confirm if the stream is working fine?
Yeah, I'll just check. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, great. Shall I begin then?
All right, we can start.
All right. A very good evening to one and all. My name is Karman. I'm a member of the IPCD, and I welcome you all to another episode of the webinar series brought to you by IPCD about applying for thesis, internships, masters, and PhDs in other countries. This webinar will focus on the United Kingdom. We have panelists who have already been through the grind and wish to share their knowledge and experience with us. I'll quickly introduce the panelists with all of you. First, we have Harsh. Harsh is a computer science engineering student graduating in 2022. Currently, he's working as a visiting undergraduate researcher at the Visual Computing Research Group, Cardiff University. He is involved as an undergraduate research assistant with ADAPT Adapt Lab, BITS Pilani. Formerly, he has worked as a summer research intern at CSIR CEERI Pilani. He will begin his thesis in collaboration with TU Graz in the upcoming semester. His current research includes working with GANs for image synthesis. He is looking forward to explore the field of video-based deep learning and 3D reconstruction. Next up, we have Saurjya. Saurjya Sarkar graduated from BITS Pilani in 2017 with MSc Physics plus BE in Triple E. During his time in BITS, he was a member of the music club where he picked up an interest in music production and audio programming. He did his Triple E thesis in intelligent music production at Centre for Digital Music, Queen Mary Institute of London. After graduating from BITS, he worked in the audio QA team at Qualcomm, Hyderabad, where he authored 2 patents in speech recognition and spatial audio. In 2019, he returned to QMUL to pursue his PhD in AI and music specializing in time domain source separation using deep learning. And the last and not the least, we have Deepak Guneja. He is currently doing an internship at an investment management firm in London and recently completed the Masters in Financial Analysis at London Business School. Prior to that, he worked at DE Shaw India for 1 year and studied computer science at BITS. He read a wide variety of stuff. He reads a wide variety of stuff, philosophical, political, and science and art, and so on. And he's a movie buff and a Nolan fan. We are delighted to have you all with us here. And with no further ado, I think we can begin with the webinar. Harsh, why don't you go first? You can start by
sure.
presenting your screen.
Just a second. Is my screen visible to you?
Yes, you're audible. Your screen is visible.
All right. Cool. So I'll be talking about intern and thesis applications at like in general, but since I've gotten it in Cardiff, so slightly specific to the United Kingdom. So the first step in getting a thesis or getting an internship abroad is to identify your domain or the topic you want to work on. You can't in your applications write, oh, I want to work on MLAI. My interest lies in working in MLAI. You want to be able to portray yourself as a focused individual. You can't uh, spread yourself out too thin and be like, oh, I want to do something in computer science. You want to tell them that, okay, this is what I like about your work. So you need to know what work you want to talk about. So this simple example here, the statement, my interest lies in working in MLAI, sounds very first yearish. versus I would like to work on applications of GANs, particularly in proto generation. It makes you sound slightly more focused. Secondly, after identifying your domain, you want to find a supervisor for you. So since I have a computer science background, I use csrankings.org. I'm not aware of other branches, parallel for other branches, but this is very helpful. You basically can filter out based on a certain stipulated time period, the research output of various universities in particular topics, like let's say computer networks. You can just pick that topic and then they'll give you a list of universities with the top applications in that stipulated period of time. Within the university, there's a list of professors with their corresponding web page and their corresponding Google Scholar link. What's most important is their Google Scholar page, because uh, a lot of the times they have published a lot like 5-6 years back, but now have more or less stagnated in the particular topic. So you want to have supervisors who are currently actively pursuing research in the topic, not are a thing of the past, right? So have a look at the citations, have a look at this H index, have a look at the collaborators, whether eventually you would want to pursue a master's or a PhD in those universities. And then based off of that, make a priority list of those supervisors. Once you're done with that, then on each of the supervisors web page, yes, this is a time consuming process. On each of the supervisors web page, you want to look at whether they are accepting undergraduate students. A lot of them sometimes mention that, oh, please do not email me regarding an internship, regarding a thesis, vagera, vagera, right? But on the other hand, there are few who are like, please email me if you want an undergraduate thesis. So you want to put those up in your list, and then it's highly likely that you get a reply, if not an acceptance, and maybe they can refer you to someone else. Fine. Once you've identified your supervisors, you want to mail them. Well, to mail them, I followed a template that got me approx 50% reply rate, which is supposed to be good. But again, I do not claim that this is the best template that is possible. It might not work for you, it might work better for you. So as the first paragraph is just a simple introduction to the name, your branch, and your institution. At times, there you might be mailing, professors in universities that share an MOU with BITS Pilani. For those who don't know what an MOU is, it's a memorandum of understanding, and the list of MOUs is given on the IPCD website. Right. You also want to mention your availability, like the months, the approximate amount of time, and the approximate months, like either you gender for summer interns it's usually like May to August. So then they also know that fine, the type of project that they're going to offer has to be a shorter or a longer project. The second paragraph is the main paragraph, which you have to change specific to the professor. You can't have a templatized email which you send mass mailing karke to everyone. You want to mention the work that you have of them that you have read and understood. Like if you've not understood it, then do not write that work, because they'll know that you've not understood it. Fine. Uh, then also about that work, what struck you, what you liked, what intrigued you the most, and a lot of professors like you suggesting improvements, like, oh, maybe we can try changing a certain part of it to get better results, or maybe we can apply the same technique in a separate domain, stuff like that, right? Contrary to some Indian professors which don't like it, like the whole stereotype that Indian professors don't like it, foreign professors love it. For prior experience in the field, you want to mention BITS courses if they're relevant, electives if they're relevant, projects you must mention no matter what, papers if you have, then I shouldn't be telling you what to do because I don't have any. Uh, for projects, do not mention projects that are completely irrelevant, like, oh, you're looking at an NLP topic, but you're talking about a computer networks project. No, they don't care. They want to see why you're a proper fit and why they would be justified in selecting you as an intern. So you want to be as specific to the topic. If you don't have projects, then just clearly mention you don't. Fine. Greeting, you want to attach a drive link to your CV, and if sometimes they need it, like a university transcript as well, you can apply to it on the AUGSD portal, and use an appropriate signature. The signature I used is here. You can take a screenshot, but I think the slides are going to be shared anyways, so you can have a look at it then. Fine. So I've just put into words what was in points here, and yeah, you can have a look at this later. Important do's and don'ts for mailing. For summer interns and odd sem thesis, you need to start mailing around October, November of the previous year and stop in December and early Jan. Why you need to start mailing so early is because you need to have a formal letter of acceptance by April, if I'm not mistaken, for your odd sem thesis. And then after which you have to apply to BITS forms, and there's a lot of procedures involved. In fact, the bids process is slightly more tedious than the actual getting the acceptance process. Do not mail during December and early Jan because they are on vacation, the professors on winter vacation, and they don't open their email. So if you don't get an acceptance up until December when you start in October, you should wait for a month or two, work on your profile, recheck your email template, just figure out, okay, maybe this is something I can improve on, and then start again in late Jan, early Jan. Right? You want your email to reach their inbox at a time wherein they are active, because they generally check their emails around between 8 to 10 a.m. And they get hundreds of them throughout the day. So if you send your email at around 8:39 on a weekday, it is highly likely that they at least see your email in their inbox, forget to open it. So that improves your chances of them replying to you. If they don't reply to you in for a week, send a reminder. If they don't reply to you after that, I would say don't send another reminder because it didn't work for me. And but generally, if they wanted to reply to you, they would look at it in the first week or two itself. Leverage IPCD MOUs. Like I said, I mentioned the IPCD website. You must go through them. They are in different regions segregated. Like there's Australia, there's Asia, there's the United States and Canada together, and there are European universities as well. Do not use a mail tracker. I made this mistake in my first 10 or so emails, wherein I got a rather low reply rate, but it was because like I searched online. They say that some professors can figure out, and they have software that tells them that okay, this person's using an email tracker, and they don't like it. They call it a violation of their privacy. Do not fixate on one professor. You can't be like, oh, this guy is my dream professor. I want to work under him no matter what. His work is the best. Yevo. You need to send out 10 emails, 20 emails at a time. And if you get their acceptance, then keep that on hold, and then you can continue pursuing your dream thing. But do not fixate on one and ignore the others. Do not expect replies because they are generally busy. But if you aren't getting any at all, like sometimes you get rejection emails saying that, oh, you do not take external students, or you need to have had a master's before you work with our research group, stuff like that. You need to maybe have a look at your email template again, maybe see where you're going wrong, or talk to some seniors. Do not email to professors from the same department. It is disrespectful. Matlab, it's like हाँ ठीक है एक ना एक तो मिल जाएगा. That's not the attitude you want to portray. If one professor has not replied to you and you want to email another one from the same department, wait for like at least a month or so before you email them. If the professor is famous, like has an H index above like 50, 60, then you might want to CC their PhD candidates because they're generally busy. They're doing reviews, they're doing conferences, etc., etc. And their PhD candidates are the ones which you're most likely going to be interacting with anyways. So you should CC them in the email. And last but not the least is do not mention intern in the subject of the email because they have explicit filters that say, okay, if the word intern is in the subject, then put it into spam because they don't want to deal with that. Right. I did not have an interview. Unfortunately, I did not. But if you do, then you should have a presentation about yourself, about your achievements, about your work, and how your work is relevant, and maybe even the paper you discussed, what you want to change, and how it can impact it. After the acceptance, if it's a thesis, you need to immediately, I cannot stress this enough, immediately ask for a formal letter of acceptance. I made the mistake of not doing that and waiting until the last moment and then getting into full panic mode and then worrying that, oh no, career gaya. But uh, if you get it early, then it becomes much easier for you to deal with bits administrative, wherein they sometimes ask, okay, is there a stipend, is there not a stipend? So you can go do a back and forth with the supervisor then. In case of intern, you don't really need an official acceptance letter because it's basically you're doing stuff on your own. But just confirm the start date, and if there is any preliminary work if any preliminary work needs to be done, because at times you do not necessarily have the complete knowledge of the project. So the professors might ask you to read few papers or like work on few softwares beforehand so that the process is streamlined. Right. Few frequently asked questions and questions that I had when I was during the process. Does CGPA matter a lot, or what is a good CGPA? CGPA does not matter a lot, but like it's good if you have like an 8 plus. If you have a low CGPA, like a 6 or a 7, not 7, sorry, 6, then you should have projects and experiences to back up that low CG. You can't be like, oh, I've not done well in academics, I don't have projects, but please lay low. That's not going to work. Do you need to have had prior experience in the field? It depends on the professor, to be honest. Like at times, sometimes they just look at your CGPA, they see like, oh, you're a 9 pointer or you're an 8.5 pointer, and then like, okay, fine, you're good enough. Sometimes they want you to have had some prior knowledge at least, especially when it comes to interns. Thesis generally, it's not that big of a issue. Do online MOOCs make an impact? Should I spend time on them? Should I do them rather than projects? No, they do not make a lot of impact. I mean, I had, I think, one specialization and another, like two specializations done at the time I was applying, but I did not mention them at all. Instead, you should rather focus on doing university courses, which are on either on YouTube or on official university websites with assignments and videos. Like, I think one very common example is CS231N for computer vision. You should do those assignments and then mention that in an email saying that, okay, fine, I worked on so and so concepts in this course and applied them to my projects. Best thing is obviously to have projects. Is it possible to manage both PU summer intern applications and doing the cold mailing process? I knew in my second year that I was not sitting for placements, so I just did not enroll for summer interns. But it, from what I've heard from my friends, both are taxing. Like I knew cold mailing was taxing, and my friend said that studying competitive coding and like the stress of having interviews during the day during classes is slightly stressful. So again, it's your decision. If you think you can manage, like obviously some have managed doing both. If you can manage doing both, then go ahead, great. But if you're sure that you don't want to sit for placements and if you want to pursue a master's immediately or you want to do a PhD immediately, then my suggestion would be to not enroll in some interns and work on your profile in that time that you would have spent studying competitive. What if my branch does not match my area of interest? Example, a mechanical engineering student wanting to do a computer networks internship. I don't think BITS allows theses with a change in branch because the requirement is that the course supervisor needs to be of the same branch or something like that. I'm not sure about this. But for interns, yes, if you have like projects to back it up to show your knowledge and you have a decent enough profile, then I don't think it should be an issue. Like there are a lot of students in Triple E at least that I know of who have gotten interns in top universities based off of their profile and not their branch, and having a lowish, moderate CGPA. uh, what if I get multiple acceptances? Keep mailing till you get your dream one, and keep the others on hold. You can always say no to them, like oh, family issues or like bits are not allowing or something else came up, stuff like that. So yeah, if you don't be satisfied with an immediate result, keep mailing till you get honest. That's it from me, and I'd like to hand it over to Saurjya. He'll be talking about PhD, the PhD process.
Thanks a lot for that, Harsh. So the things that Harsh talked about is kind of where I started from, and it's like absolutely essential to nail that first before going towards a PhD. So just a couple of things that I wanted to add to what he talked about was one of the things was that regarding the returns or replies on emails, one thing that happened with me, I was looking for opportunities in music tech from my third year, but in my third year, I did not have any publications out there. Instead, I was being offered a research internship in astrophysics, which was not what I wanted to do, but then I still went ahead with it. And once I did that internship and had a publication out of it, even though I was using the exact same templates, kind of contacting the exact same people, my response rate went from 10% to like 60% just because I had a publication out there, even though that's in an absolutely unrelated field of what I wanted to do, because that kind of shows that you have the capacity to do research and do like scientific writing and stuff like that. So anyway, I'll go on to my part. So, for a PhD, the first and foremost thing that you need to ask yourself, should I do a PhD? Because it's a very big decision. Typically, people have this opinion that if you do a PhD, you will your career goal is to become a lecturer. But that's not really the case, because a lot of fields, especially with AI and tech lately, have immense opportunities in industry, which with very compelling pay, and like it's a very competitive industry. So that typically, if you do a PhD, you can jump into industry pretty much right off the bat if you're working with deep learning or AI and stuff like that. But if your goal is to become an academic, you have to realize it's a fairly long drawn out process, because you don't typically become an academic with a permanent position right after your PhD. You would typically do a few postdoctoral research positions after your PhD. And the thing with postdoctoral positions are they are usually of a limited duration. Like they'll be a project for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And depending on the maturity of the field, like some fields kind of have people working 2 or 3 postdocs back to back before they can find a permanent position in a university. And secondly, the pay scales in academia are far lower than industry. Like after like 8 years of doing postdocs, even when you get a permanent position as a lecturer, on the other hand, in computer science, if you chose to go into the industry, 8 years down the line, your salary is still going to be half the salary of what you would have had if you joined industry right after your PhD. And apart from that, for us, especially studying abroad, postdocs, you would typically have to move from a different university or different university each time. So you would kind of have to move between countries, or and which becomes a problem for us as Indians, because we don't have the same kind of flexibility as Europeans do. Every time you'll have to apply for a new visa, and if you're moving countries, it kind of impacts your route to getting a PR in any given country. And until you have a PR, you can't really have the freedom to move around and look for opportunities at multiple places. So, and apart from that, so that's the entire dilemma of if I want to be an academic or or like a commercial researcher afterwards. More importantly, you have to ask yourself, do I actually like research, or is it just something that fascinates me? Because you need to consider the fact that how much you have grown in the 3 years that you have been at Pilani, like what you thought you were interested in 3 years ago versus what you're interested in now. You would do a PhD for at least 3 to 5 years. Do you think you'll still be interested in this after 3 years? That's a question that you really need to ask yourself, and which sometimes can be tricky, but it's better to know that, yes, this is exactly what I want before getting into a PhD. So, doing a PhD in the UK, what are the advantages? So, first and foremost, PhDs have this, like a lot of people have this opinion that PhDs can go on forever and ever and ever and are very long. But that's not the case. In the UK, you kind of have to finish your PhD within 5 years, regardless of whatever you do. Like at the end of 5 years, you'd either get a PhD or get an MPhil if you cannot defend your thesis. And typically, most projects are funded, and the duration of your PhD is kind of determined by the duration of your funding. So, like, people can finish their PhDs in as short as 2.5 years, if that's what your funding is, or if you're unfunded. Whereas in most of the funded cases, they'll typically have a 3-year funding or a 4-year funding. So they'll pretty much make you work for the duration that you have your fund, which sometimes is the case in US. Like I've heard PhD students in the US typically have way more hectic work hours as compared to PhD students in the UK. And then there's, of course, the fact that majority of the projects are funded by the UK government. So you are kind of getting funded by British taxpayers. So payback for whatever they did to us. And apart from that, especially with AI, UK has one of the largest GPU clusters and supercomputer clusters in the world, and most of the universities in the UK have access to them. So like you do really get very good infrastructure to work with. On the other hand, the downsides to doing a PhD in the UK is you usually come on a tier 4 student visa, and the 4 or 3 years you'll spend on your tier 4 visa will not count towards your PR. So if you want like a permanent residency in the UK, so that eventually, if you want, you can get a citizenship and then you can move around different countries for work much more freely, you need to stay in a country for 5 years. But the number of years that you spend in the UK doing your PhD don't count towards the 5 years. And another thing is the stipends for PhDs in US and EU are typically much higher than the UK, because UK has this weird blend of privatized education but with government funding. So it's like 17K a year, which is the government mandated salary for PhD students, whereas in the EU it's typically 30 or 35 or even more. And because you're in a tier 4, you can only do part-time work, which limits to working 20 hours a week. This becomes a problem if you want to do like internships during your PhD, which also is a thing. And because if you do an internship, it'll have to be full-time, and often you will have to like quit your tier 4 visa, get a tier 2 visa, and start doing an internship. And once you finish your internship, you kind of have to reapply for the entire student visa all over again, which kind of becomes a hassle if you want to do an internship in the UK. So often, many times, people do not look at internships in the UK. If you're studying in the UK, they'll just go to US or some other place so that they don't have to go through this hassle. So doing a PhD in London, the pros are it's like the global hub for art, music, and film. There is like immense exposure. There's just so many things happening here. It's an amazing place to live. Like half of Bollywood is shot in London usually, so you kind of know what London is like. And a really good thing that I like about this place is you don't really feel like an outsider in London when you arrive here, because most of the people in London are not British or are not natively from London. They're all people who have moved here to work or something else. So you really do fit in quite easily. And then not just arts and humanities, but there's a huge startup environment here. There are a lot of big old industries present in the UK. So you can make insane connections there. And another advantages, and this is subjective, but like typically the ranking of people that you meet, like usually engineers and MBAs and managers are like the top people if you go to US or if you are in India. But in the UK, engineers are kind of paid much lesser as compared to artists or lawyers and stuff like that. So the blend of people that you meet is quite nice, and that really does give you much better exposure, and like you get to know a lot more about life by meeting people who are not the same as you. Cons of being in London: it's really expensive. It's as expensive as New York or California, and the salaries are not as high as compared to there. So on average, if you have a stipend, 60% of your stipend will go to rent directly, and that leaves you with very little to work with. And the weather is quite depressing as well. So what do I need to get a PhD admit? First and foremost, having publications before you start your PhD is by far the most impactful thing that you can have during your PhD applications. More apart from that, you need to have a solid interest in the research that you want to do. Not just something that looks cool, but something that you have expertise in, have some experience in, and can come up with ideas to explore on your own and not just depend on your supervisor to tell you what you need to do. Regarding a PhD in the UK, having a master's is recommended, but it's not essential. If you can make up for experience in other ways, like papers, patents, or other things, you will still get an admit. And especially there are some programs called Center for Doctoral Trainings, which involve some amount of coursework. So there the requirement for master's is even looser. Definitely right now, being in college, you should absolutely prioritize doing a thesis over doing a PS if you want to do a PhD. That will allow you to build good relationships with academics, give you an experience of what it is to do like research, and possibly have publications out of it, which will really help your profile. For a PhD, you should focus on expertise more than developing a varied variety of skills, which is like what Harsh said before, kind of similar to what you need to have to get a research internship. And yeah, building relationships with academics before applying to a PhD is kind of crucial because that will lead to really meaningful letters of recommendation and also just an experience of what it is like to work with an academic. So like if you're in a position where you cannot get like natural letters of recommendations from your academics who have supervised you before, and like if you're being asked to write an LOR for yourself, you're like it's you probably are not in a great position. And finally, again, publications. That's what it all matters before getting into a PhD. So my own journey, I started doing physics and triple E. In my third year, I already wanted to get into music tech because I was with music club and stuff, but it was quite difficult because I'd barely done any triple E courses and did not have any credentials behind me. So I was applying for internships, but wasn't getting any responses. And meanwhile, I did a SOP with Dr. Kaushal Vaidya in physics, and there was this funded position that four of us had available to go to Taiwan and do some research. So I went for that instead in my third year. And then that work got published eventually in a journal in my third year. And on the basis of that publication, the next year when I was applying for music tech research internships, I was getting a lot more responses. And in fact, one of the things that I did wrong was I was kind of fixated on getting a funded research internship because my last one was funded. But in hindsight, I know getting a thesis or a summer internship that is funded in research is extremely rare. So I kind of turned down 2 or 3 opportunities because I kind of tried pushing them to pay me and not just make me work for free. But now in hindsight, and now that I see all the internships that do happen in research, almost none of them are ever funded. So don't press for funding for your summer internships or thesis. It's great if you find it luckily, but don't expect it to happen. Yeah, so after that thesis at Center for Digital Music that I got after in my fifth year, I did some work, published a paper out of that, and then on the basis of that experience, I got a job in audio quality in Qualcomm. While I was there, I submitted a couple, like 4 or 5 patent ideas, out of which 2 got filed, and one of them is granted so far. And that really helped towards my application as well. And then when I decided to do a PhD, I was trying to do a PhD in the same field that I had an internship, my thesis in. But the issue was the project that I wanted to apply for. So a lot of funding sources kind of require the student to be a UK resident. And by a UK resident, they mean someone who has lived in the UK for the last 3 years. So that also includes someone who has done a bachelor's or did a master's or has been working for 2 years in the UK. So a lot of positions required the student to be a UK resident, so I could not get that position. But then my supervisor himself forwarded my profile to a few other academics, and then they contacted me for a different position, which was in this source separation topic, which was funded by by an industry partner. They approached me for it, and I was like, yeah, sounds cool, I'll do it. So that's how I started my PhD in 2019. So how to find a PhD? Findaphd.com. So findaphd.com has like it's like the place where all UK, so it's specific to UK mostly. It has some offers from other countries, but you'll see majority of them are from the UK. And it is where all the people when they get like a decent grant, that's where they'll advertise. So it's like the first place to go to if you're looking for PhDs. But then also keep in mind that Find a PhD is not a free service. Like the academics actually have to pay Find a PhD to advertise their positions. So if the academic has a smaller grant, like for 1 or 2 students, he might not be posting on Find a PhD, but like on other forums. So typically what you would want to do is find conferences that are of your research interest, like the papers that you see that are the most relevant to you. And most of these conferences will have an associated mailing list. So get on that mailing list. That's where like opportunities, not just in UK, but all across Europe and the world, people will be posting there. And also at conferences, you might also find a list of research groups that are associated to that research field. So that's often useful to then go down the spider web and figure out what academics exist in that field and what do they do. While applying, making sure if your supervisor or the department that you're applying to has funded positions available, making sure that they have funding available is really useful, and that will kind of reduce the overall effort and fatigue that you have during your applications very highly. And that's all that I wanted to cover here. So while choosing a PhD, one of the things that I see a lot of people from India do is go after the name of a university and not so much so the specific topic, because they are not sure themselves of what they want to work on. And I think for a PhD, that's a very, very big mistake. For a master's, the exact opposite is true. But for a PhD, definitely stick to choosing the right supervisors and the right research groups, and not if the university is is something that you know of from before. And once you join a PhD, and if you think it's not the right fit, don't worry. Changing topics and supervisors is possible under the right circumstances. And when you're looking at supervisors, look at their previous students, their previous research. Look at if they have previous students, look at their career trajectories. Think if you want to be like them, and if that inspires you, do definitely get in touch with them. And also keep in mind the number of students that a supervisor has under them at any point, because you do not want to have a supervisor who has like 10 or 12 PhD students under them and has no time for you. And typically, you will have to choose between either a younger academic or a more mature academic. There are pros and cons to both. A younger academic will have way more time for you. He will be way more involved with your research. He'll help you at every step of the way. But at the same time, with a younger academic, you might not have as much flexibility in your PhD direction. Like if you're a person if you're not the one who's coming up with the idea and kind of reliant on a supervisor telling you what to do and then you accomplishing it, then a younger supervisor is the right one for you. But on the other hand, if you're a person who kind of came up with your own idea and want to explore it, going with a mature supervisor is quite useful, because they are usually far more laid back. They are very resourceful regarding funding and will make sure you have all the resources that you need. They'll have great connections. So like just by the fact that you're a PhD under him, people will know of you. And but the disadvantage is mature researchers are often not actively doing research. Like they might not have written a line of code in the last 6 years, which is kind of a bummer, especially if you're working with deep learning, because they'll kind of have no idea of the specifics that you're doing. And that might be an issue. So regarding funding, almost every PhD student that I know in London, all of them are funded. Like very, very, very rarely will someone do an unfunded PhD. And the funding typically covers both your tuition, which for international students is usually much higher, like around 25 to 30,000 a year, and also an annual stipend, which the government mandated minimum, I think, is 17. And if your research is kind of useful, like if it's a thing that is worth doing research in, it will most likely be funded by like EPSRC or UKRI or some industry or something. Like if you cannot find a funded project, you should really reconsider the topic that you're choosing to pursue, because you want to do something that people care about. And typically there are two types of grants that are there. Either they're individual academic grants, where an academic applies for a specific project and gets funding for 1 or 2 PhD students. And in those, the starting dates are usually quite flexible, but these are more difficult to find because these are not often as well advertised. On the other hand, the UK government in the last few years, has started going, does not give as much funding to individual advisors, but now is trying to make departments as centers for excellence. So they have started the Center for Doctoral Training grants, which are often just one department in a university, or can even be a collaboration between departments across 3 or 4 universities. Like there'll be a Center for Doctoral Training. Like I'm a part of Center for Doctoral Training in AI and Music. My university and Oxford have this CDT for AI and games, and there is one at Sheffield for speech and language technology. So these grants typically are huge. Like there'll be a 10-year grant for like 60 students, 12 students every year, and they have a lot of money. And also the best part is these grants usually do not come with the typical nationality requirements that you have to be a European or you have to be an English citizen. These larger grants have like 50% room for international students, So these are like a great place to start. And also talking more about CDTs. CDTs have much lesser fixed requirement for master's degree because they involve like uh, taught modules as well for 1 to 4 semesters, and have enough funding. And not just that, they like float a list of topics and for each supervisor. So like you have a starting point. You don't have to come up with a topic all by yourself and then worry about if this is good enough or if this is important. So going through CDTs is a great way to get into a PhD. And also CDTs typically start at the beginning of a year, once a year, and they'll take in like 10 students working on 10 different things, but in a similar field every year. So it's more like starting a course. You'll have batchmates and you'll have a support system. So it's more like having batchmates at Pilani, whereas doing an individual grant PhD can often be extremely isolating. Like you won't know other people who work on the same field and are at the same level of maturity or whatever. Like starting a PhD in a cohort is a really better position than starting an individual PhD. So how do you apply for a PhD? First and foremost, build a tailored research proposal for a supervisor. Contact your supervisor. If they approve of your proposal, then you'll have to go and apply through the university. If the university accepts your position, then you will receive a confirmation of acceptance of studies letter from the university. This is crucial. This is what you need for a visa. And also you typically would need to get proof of funding before even you get the CAS. But if it's a funded project, you'll get your proof of funding along with the CAS. If you do not have a funded project, you'll have to show like probably around 1 crore of money that you have that you can spend to uh, do a PhD, because a PhD is like 4 years. So yeah, you need proof of funding, you need a CAS. And then if your research is in something that might have implications of national security, like deep learning is one of the things that they consider that. So then you need to have an ATAS certificate, which is Advanced Technology Anti-Terrorism something something. And that approval takes like 2 to 3 months, which is kind of the longest step of the process. So you need to do that as quickly as possible once you have confirmation of acceptance. And apart from that, you need to take IELTS, but a specific UKVI IELTS, not the general IELTS. I think this might be a requirement for other studies as well, like doing masters, but this is something that a lot of people have been confused about whether to do. Like they'll first book a regular IELTS and then realize, oh shit, I need to do a UKVI IELTS for a tier 4 visa. And also UK for some reason requires a tuberculosis test. I don't know why specifically TB in this day and age, but that also takes some good time. And then you just submit for your tier 4 visa once all of this is done. The experience of doing a PhD is much closer to a 9 to 5 job than a master's program, than a bachelor's or master's program. Treat your supervisors like a manager. Typically, you will graduate or transfer to writing when your funding is about to get over. And having multiple supervisors is often the norm in many universities. So like I have 2 supervisors. One is a younger academic, one is an older academic, kind of the best of both worlds. And after you submit your thesis, there'll be an external advisory board who will come and review your thesis for 1 to 3 months. They'll come up with corrections, which might be minor, like typing errors or small sentence structure issues, or can be major corrections like scientific flaws in your research. With minor corrections, it's a pass. After your viva, you're done. You are a doctor now. But with major corrections, you basically have to go back and redo experiments. So that's like the worst case scenario. It happens to like 10% of students probably. That's like failing your PhD, and then you have to go back, do things again, rewrite update your thesis, and then in 6 to 9 months, you again submit your thesis, and then hopefully you pass with minor corrections this time. But this most likely you will not have funding for this duration. And another important thing is there are some recent changes to the provision to working after you finish your studies. And this applies to all bachelor's, master's, and PhD students in the UK. From July 2021, there is like a OPT, like in the US, they have this OPT thing where after your on your F1 visa, you can work for up to 3 years. So they have a similar system now in the UK that if you have a PhD, you can work for up to 3 years after finishing your PhD on your student visa. And that is useful because in the UK, to get a tier 2 skilled worker visa, your employer needs to have the capability of sponsoring one. Like, not all companies or all universities are in a position where they can sponsor a tier 2 visa, because a tier 2 visa requires them to prove that they could not find this talent in the UK and hence they're getting it from abroad. So which requires them to do like interviews, reject a bunch of people, and then tell the government that, hey, I really need this guy. So tier 2 visa is your goal. But if you don't get a tier 2 visa immediately, you can still work in the UK anywhere for 3 years after you finish your PhD. I think for masters it's 2 years. And but the catch is this time that you spend working on your tier 4 visa, it does not count towards your PR again. So your goal should be to get a tier 2 visa. And that's my time. I think I overshot by a bit, but take it away, Deepak.
All right. Thank you, Saurjya. Shall I share my screen now?
Yeah, just a second. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah. Before I start, congratulations, everyone. We have won our first gold medal. That's an achievement. So yeah, I'll share my screen 1 second. Okay, here we go. Let me know if you're able to see my screen. Can you see it? Okay, good. Oh yeah, thank you, Saurjya and Harsh, for the detailed presentation. I think you have included most of the things. I will just have related to master stuff or the finance stuff or the business oriented stuff. So, uh, so like when you start looking for a master's, and especially in a B school, if it's related to business or management or that kind of stuff, the first thing that comes to your mind is, do you want to pursue it in UK or US or like other European business schools? And for me also, like that was the first consideration, because yeah, there are pros and cons of everything. Like if you go for UK or if you go for US, the first and foremost is a work visa. I think which just now Saurjya mentioned, like in US you get it for 3 years. In UK for the masters it's for 2 years only, and that's now like that's been recently introduced. And but after that, in UK, it is relatively easier for the companies to sponsor visa for your full time, but it's relatively difficult in US. For example, I'm not saying about tech firms. For example, for tech firms, it's relatively easier in US as well. But for financial firms, like you consider big banks, Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley, they don't sponsor visa in US. Even for investment banking positions, they do sponsor here in UK. And then again, the second point you consider when you choosing the country, I would say, is the job opportunities. And in that sense, I'd say US definitely does have more opportunities, but right now, because London being the financial capital, so obviously you will find more or less everything you want in finance, you want to explore in finance in London as well. So you won't face an issue there. The third point is related to the tuition fees or the scholarships. The first thing is US, the B schools there, they do have like good amount of endowment funds. So they do have they can sponsor, they can provide good number of scholarships. In UK, it's relatively less. And but the pros is the tuition fees here in UK, they are relatively less than US. For example, if you consider for London Business School itself, my master's was which is for 1 year only, and the tuition fees is around £40,000, which is around 40 lakhs INR. But if you consider like the similar kind of a master's in UC Berkeley, which is also 1 year master's in financial engineering, the tuition fees is around 80 to 90K USD, which you convert, it's like it's around 60 lakhs INR. And then if you translate this into the cost, like it would be like in US, if you even want to do a master's in business school, it could cost you around 80 lakhs to 1 crore. Then the fourth part is language. In US, it's more or less English. You need in English. But in UK, because it's very much associated with Europe as well, and you're trying to move into finance and you're trying to move into front office roles, the client-facing roles. And when you are working with, let's say you're working with a French client, your firm is working with a French client, so the firm will prefer someone with a French background. And that's an issue you would face here, because if you know a European language here, like if you know any European language, be it French, be it German, or be it Spanish, I would say that definitely helps in UK. In US, it's not the case, because more or less it's only English. So yeah, uh, and then after choosing the nation, let's say you want to consider UK or US, then you'll just consider like which course do you exactly want to pursue. You have early career course. Early career course mostly are in UK only. In US, they are mid career programs, not early careers. Early careers are programs in which you can directly apply just after graduation as well. Or like the program I pursued, it's like you can have like just 0 to 2 year of work experience and you can apply to that program. You don't need 3 4 5 years of work experiences. And then you need to figure out, okay, you want to do masters in finance, you want to do masters in management, you want to do an MBA. For example, MBA, it's a mid-career thing, and you would be applying for an MBA. Like the minimum criteria is you should have at least 2 years of work experience. But if you want to apply for a competitive B school, so you need to have good amount of experience, like 4 3 4 years please. And similarly, while choosing a master's, now MBAs also are being offered as 1 year, and most of the MBAs are 2 years. But yeah, INSEAD offers a 1 year MBA. So I think in UK, Oxford offers 1 year MBA. So you need to choose: do you want to do a 1 year MBA? Like there are again pros and cons about that. Like in 1 year MBA, you don't have the internship period. You would be doing after your graduation, you would be doing an internship, or you would be trying to find a full time. So all these stuffs you need to consider. Like, do you want to go for 1 year? Do you want to go for 2 years? Do you want to go for finance? Want to go for management? And if you want to go for early career thing, then it's fine. You can directly apply during your like undergraduate degree as well. But if you want to, let's say in masters in finance as well, I pursued masters in financial analysis, which is like I would say early career version of masters in finance. Masters in finance is a mid career program. If you have more than 2 years of work experience, you apply to masters in finance, and if you have less than 2 years of work experience, you apply to courses like Masters in Financial Analysis. And but this is a UK thing, because in US, mostly, yeah, you do have mid-career programs only. If you consider MIT, Sloan, the Masters in Finance, or Berkeley as well, so you would see people with 3 4 years of work experience also applying to those courses. Finally, you would like to consider like which B school you want to apply to. Or you want to apply to LBS, or in UK, Europe, you have HEC Paris, NCR, you have say Business School of Oxford, you have Imperial, you have LSE. So you need to consider the rankings. You need to talk with actual alumni. What's the career opportunities? Because I think when you're thinking of a master's in a B school, you are thinking in terms of like a business kind of a stuff, in the sense like career path, not exactly kind of academic stuff. So that's why you need to reach out to alumni. You need to network. I'll come to the networking part, because I think that's one of the most important part of being like in a business school. So moving to the course I pursued master's in financial analysis at London Business School, and it's like latest ranking, it's ranked number 2 in business master rankings all around the world. It's a 12 to 16 months course, probably like 12 months only. You can extend it by 4 months if you want to do additional electives. So you can extend it to 16 months. And it's an early career program. You should be having less than 2 years of work experience to apply to this program. So if you have more than 2 years of work experience, you can't apply to this course. You can apply to masters in finance, or if you want to apply for MBA. Uh, I think one of the best part about LBS, or my course as well, was like as Saurjya also mentioned, like London is very diverse, and I felt it in my batch itself. Like there were around 45 nationalities in my course, like in MFA itself, and that's amazing. You meet people from all the backgrounds, and you understand. I would say it opens your perspective. You kind of understand things, how different kinds of people think in different way. So the career opportunities after this course, because it's a finance specific, so just finance related is like either you go into investment banking, you go into investment management, private equity, trading, fintech, consulting, etc. So and yeah, now for the finances, I think I very well resonate with Saurjya. Like living in London, it's really, really, really expensive. So, but the good part is relatively tuition fees is relatively less. It's not less. Still, it's like for MFA, it's 37,900, which is around 38 lakhs, or maybe we can just round to 40 lakhs INR. But still, it's less than if you consider good B school in US. And living expenses around, yeah, 12 lakhs for 10 to 12 months, because your rent is really high. And if you want to stay closer to your university, so I'm living in zone 1 here in central London. My university is 20 minutes walk from my place. So yeah, you need to pay a really good amount of rent. And then you do have miscellaneous expenses related to visa, flight tickets. So you just add it up, and it would be like 50 to 55 lakhs. And if you want to pursue a 1 year course, And yeah, so for this program itself, I'm talking about MFA, and you can generalize it also, but still for MFA, you can give GMAT or GRE or CFA level one as well. CFA level one is for MFA only. If you want to apply for, let's say, something else like Masters in Management or MBA, you can't apply through CFA level one. Uh, then you need two LORs, letter of recommendations, ideally one academic, one professional. But they are also fine if you give two academics if you don't have work experience, because you see, because it's an early career program, so there would be people with 0 years of work experience. Just they must have done like they could have done just only one internship, so they don't have good number of professional LORs, so they just apply with two academic LORs. Then you need to submit a one-page CV only, definitely a one page, because it's like you'd see people with 10 years of work experience and business background, and they would be having just one page CV. So we with no work experience, we can't have a CV with like uh 2 or 3 pages in this context. Because I know for masters, because my friends are also applying for masters, so for masters in computer science, so all that stuff, that's a very different thing. But if you're applying to a business school, you need to limit it to one page, and then you need to submit your transcripts. For the essays part, LBS application is quite intensive, and it's like there are 2 or 3 main essays, like 600 words each round, and there are 7 to 8, or I think maybe 10 also, 300 words question, short answer questions. So those are like the supporting questions which supports your main essays, like why this, why not this, all that stuff. And then you need to fill the application form. It takes some. So if you obviously you should not apply to only one school, you should apply to different university to hedge your chances, and there are really good universities. And so when you prepare for for the one application, it takes around, depending on, like, assuming you have already taken your GMAT GRE, one application takes around 1 month. But then after that, because you have already prepared your essays, you just need to make some tweaks here and there, and you're good to go with other universities as well. And yeah, so finally, like, because if you're pursuing a master's in a business school, the big question is job. And it actually boils down to networking. So it doesn't work like our campus placements. Companies don't come to our campus for hiring as such. They do come here, they do come for presentation, but then you need to apply on your own. You need to prepare your CV, you need to prepare a cover letter, you need to apply on your own. They won't interview by themselves, like not like let's planning campus placements. And these things do start very, very early. My program commenced last August, like end of August something. And but the job applications, we started back in July or June itself, because these investment banking or the investment management, these companies start recruiting very early, and the sooner you apply, the better it is. Again, uh, when you apply for jobs, don't narrow the universe to way that okay, you want to just apply to, let's say, you want to go to into investment banking. Just don't apply to investment banking only because you want to hedge your chances. You're spending 55 lakhs INR, so you don't. I don't know, God forbids, but if you don't get something in that place, so you should be hedging your chances with something else, because it's all possible to move from, let's say, consulting to IB or IB to consulting, and apply to all the different kinds of places. So I know in India it's like brand is a big thing, and it is indeed. So if you're working with a big brand, that's a really good thing. But here, like in terms of compensation, in terms of every other thing, boutique firms are really also nice. Like they do pay a lot, they do pay, and they do have good reputation. So yeah, apply everywhere in the sense, like, if the role suits you, and apply to different kinds of roles. For example, if you want to go to private equity, definitely apply to investment banking or consulting as well, because private equity firms, PE firms, they do take people from IB in consulting. And then I think, as Saurjya also mentioned, like personalizing stuff, if you, or Harsh mentioned, like having some personalized emails to professors. Similarly, it applies to companies as well. If you're applying to a company, you should have your personalized cover letters for each and every firm. I know it's difficult. You can have, if you just have 3 paras in your cover letter. So first para could be common, but you need to have at least one para which is unique to the firm. And that's where networking comes into picture. So you should interact with employees working there or in the team there, or you should try to find some bits in, because more or less, I think in big firms at least, you would have people like Bitsin working. So you try to reach out to them, try to get some referral. Again, yeah, COVID didn't allow us to network through in-person things, like to meet our copy, but still try to set up a call at least so that you can network as much as you can. And again, I think the European language stuff, because it's a front office kind of a role, client facing role. If you know any European language, and I would say like not a beginner stuff, but you can like convey properly, converse very properly in a European language, any European language, that would definitely help you, because many firms they clearly mention that additional language, like if you know French, you would be considered something like that. So because they are English with French, English with German, something like that, because they do have German or French clients. So I think, yeah, that's more or less from my side. But yeah, feel free to put questions on the chat, and yeah, I'm happy to answer.
Great. Thanks a lot, Harsh. Thanks a lot, Saurjya, and thanks a lot, Deepak. This was very insightful. I'm pretty sure the audience had a lot to gain from that. And as the session was going on, we have a few questions. I think I'm going to go through them one by one. If you feel like the question has already been answered, you can either skip that or answer that briefly. That's up to your discretion. Starting from the top, the first question is from Pratyush. He asked, Harsh, you mentioned do not email two profs from the same department. What about the same department but different labs or research groups? Does that work?
I mean, I wouldn't recommend it because they talk to each other and like you just be. Uh, I would say to go to do what I said, that go for the one you want the most first, and then maybe if they don't reply, then a few weeks down the line, then email the others. But it's generally not very, unless you're sure that they're not going to talk to each other, which you can't be sure, because if they've not collaborated at all in the past, and I, it's risky in my opinion.
So
Okay.
I can add something if that's okay.
Yeah,
So in
sure.
my experience, people in the depends of course how large a research domain is. Like if it's a very small niche domain, or if it's like a very well researched domain. So if it's like a well researched domain, I think it's fine. You can mail multiple people because it's there's just too many people. Like not everybody knows everyone. But if it's a niche research field that a professor is invested in, I think it's safer to mail multiple people across different research interests rather than research interests like fairly distinct apart. Because this happened to me that I had applied to multiple people working in similar fields but across different countries and across different universities. And the first publication that I had when I went to the conference, six of the people who I had mailed to were there at the conference. And then everyone did know that I had approached all of them, but that was not a problem for me. But yeah, just mailing across different research groups I think is okay if you need to. Like it's not going to harm too much if even if they talk to each other, because you must realize they're academics, they have their entire lives to go on about. They're really busy. They're not going to spend 30 minutes sitting and talking about this one intern who applied for you. You're not that important in their life yet.
Great. I hope that answers it well. Deepak, if you don't want to add something to that, I'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't think I would have anything to add.
Okay. So going next, we have Harshvardhan with the next question. For Saurjya, my question is, how is it possible for a dualite, that too in MSc Physics and a BE in Triple E, to pursue a course or PhD or a hobby in a totally unrelated field, which is in this case music?
Like in my case, I was, as I said, build expertise. So I did spend like a lot of time in music club and doing sound production, helping out sounds and stuff. So I had spent the amount of time to have a good enough expertise where I could talk to professionals in the field at their level. So that was one. But the biggest challenge that I faced was convincing bits that this was not a hobby or useless thing that I wanted to do, but actually related to my field of study. So music processing is audio effects are signal processing is DSP. So that's the approach that I took. It took some time to figure that out, but that's what I kind of pulled it off. As I remember, when I was submitting my thesis proposal, I did not use the term music once in my entire thesis because I knew the moment an academic at BITS will see that, it will raise triggers. So I just talked about multi-channel signal processing, audio perception, blah blah blah. So it's the BITS, getting it approved through BITS was the most difficult thing. Not about like how you choose to spend your time is absolutely up to you. So you have enough time to become an expert in something if you really care about it.
Right, makes sense. Uh, Up next, we have Pratyush again. His question is, just out of curiosity, why is using a mail tracker looked down upon by professors?
So this I mentioned this because I did a lot of research. Like I had an argument with my friends, in fact, on the group after I said कि हाँ मैंने mailing start करी है, खोला ही नहीं है. People have not opened the emails. So a few of my friends said कि why using a tracker, and they were like, oh, you might face issues with that. So I was like, I didn't know of this. So I researched and then I looked up. I went on Google and a few professors had answered on their web pages as well as on Quora as well, saying that, oh, if I find out that a student that is emailing me is not is using an email tracker, then I would consider it a violation of privacy. Now, look, I did not want to take a risk saying that, okay, theek hai, if he's the only person who's considering it a violation, others might not. So I was like, it's not going to make too much of a difference. So might as well just not use it. And it worked. So
Right, Saurjya or Deepak, do you have anything to share in that? Did you use an email tracker, or did that make
So
a
yeah,
difference?
I also had a similar dilemma at my time of using email trackers, and now that I work with academics, I realize the biggest issue that your emails face is making it to the inbox. You have no idea, like more than 70% of the emails will just directly go to spam. Most people use Outlook, and it depends on Outlook's algorithms. And I think if you use an email tracker, that kind of puts your email at higher risk of going to spam. It's like, as long as your email is not going to spam, you are sure that your professor is reading it. And yeah, don't use email trackers. Just make sure you write an email personalized enough that it does not go to spam. Like, don't make it look like you're a Nigerian prince who's trying to siphon off money from them. Like, make it a legitimate email.
Yeah, I second Sarkar thoughts. It's like if you're tracking someone and the professor, so it doesn't sound good as well. Like, what are you trying to achieve here? And also, it could go to spam, and there is a very high probability if it would go to spam if you any kind of tracker. So yeah, just don't use it, because if they want to reply and it reaches their inbox, they'll definitely reply.
Right, understood. And up next, we have Yash Bansal. His question is, can you give me some suggestions for what exactly should be in the subject of the email that you sent?
So I'll read out what I had written. I literally wrote opportunity to work in the visual computing research group at Cardiff University. I mean, it was similar for the other emails I sent, like opportunity to work in the name of research group at name of university. So that I kept it simple. As I mentioned, a lot of seniors told me do not use the word intern or like uh, some assistant stuff. Sometimes it just goes into the spam directly, like as Saurjya and Deepak mentioned. So might just keep it simple. As long as they're opening a mail, it's fine.
So you wouldn't suggest anyone to be very creative with it.
Yeah, no, don't. I mean, if they want to open the email, they're going to open it irrespective. They don't want to, they're going to ignore it irrespective. So.
Okay, got it. Next, we have Adit Deshpande. He asks, did you apply just for the UK or did you apply for other countries as well? Be it,
Um, so I wanted to go in person in a my area of preference was Germany, country of preference Germany. I did not apply for DARD because my CG wasn't high enough. It was 8.6 at the time, and DARD usually has like a 9.2, 9.3 minimum. Like unofficially, DARD is like 8.5, but if you're below like 9, you're definitely not getting in. And I did apply for my tax. I got through to the interview round, and then due to like a, I would call it a language barrier, he said prepare a slide, and I thought, okay, fine, I'll prepare one slide and give you, because I followed the instructions. Apparently, he wanted like a huge presentation, and so I want in the interview I kind of messed up a little, but yeah, I did apply to a lot of places. You can't just, you want to apply to every. I also applied to Singapore, I think, NUS, and I did not apply to the US though. US I applied for our partner, but yeah, you should apply to as many countries as you want, unless you are specific about like, oh, you want to stay there for some time, or you want to work with in that country specifically. If you don't have any such preference, just go for everyone.
Okay, Saurjya, what about you? Was UK your first preference or the only country you applied to, or?
So for me, in the beginning, when I was applying for internships, I did not know much about where exactly the research community is, like, because I was just entering the research community. So I was applying everywhere, uh, a lot in the US because I have family in the US, so I thought it would be easier. But relatively lesser in the UK and Europe. But after I did my summer internship, I realized that like you start seeing patterns where the research community is focused, because like just by the virtue of conferences, like if you just look at the venues of the most popular conferences, you will realize where the major universities are. And working in a country where most of the research groups for that field are there is kind of advantageous, because you not only have a professional relationship with your peers but have a personal relationship with your colleagues in different universities. So by the time I was applying for my PhD, I kind of knew that UK is a big hub for media technologies, and the second biggest thing is Europe. But I don't have as much flexibility in Europe, so the second time around, I pretty much just only applied for that one position under my previous supervisor. I didn't apply to multiple places. But yeah, you should have, if you're applying for a PhD, you should have that thing in mind, that you want to be in a place where there are a lot of people working in similar fields in physical proximity to you. That will impact the connections that you make and your experience overall.
Right, understood. And Deepak, what about you? Did you want to go to the UK only, or how did you go about making that decision?
I wanted to go to States, honestly. And so I started my application for States only. But what happened, like when this COVID happened and this Trump sir, he kind of didn't allow students to come. Like then students also weren't able to go to US. So me applying there and spending, as I discussed earlier, like 80 lakhs INR, 1 crore INR, and studying in India, I wouldn't like to do that. So that's why I obviously thought of applying to LBS and HSC Paris, and I also started my application for US. But US was my first preference, and then I didn't complete my application for US because I didn't want to spend 80 lakhs and just sit at home. So I submitted my application for UK, this LBS, London Business School, and HEC Paris. And yeah, so I think it definitely makes sense to apply to wherever possible and wherever you want to go, because you definitely want to hedge your chances.
Great. Then moving on, we have Karthik with the next question. This is a quick one. What is the timeline of a thesis generally, as in from which month to which month?
It depends on which semester you're applying for. Like it's usually semester wise, semester long. So if you're applying for 4-1, you'll do it from August to December. And sometimes you also can start earlier if your supervisor and co-supervisor are fine with it. You can start in the summers as well. Like I know a friend of mine who's doing that right now. If you're doing 4-2, then it will be what, early Jan to May. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Then next we have Yuvraj about research assistantships or internships. Are they funded? Also, what is the ideal time to apply if BITS had no restrictions on dates?
So the restriction on dates is only for the thesis, like because you need those forms, you need to fill those AUGSD forms, you need to fill a PSD form, you need to get the signatures from your HOD, from your co-supervisor, from the original supervisor, etc., etc. With For research assistantships, that is completely different from a research internship. Research assistantships are when you go in person. You are like an employee of the university, and they pay you like it's like a a 1 year PhD, you could say, wherein you're working with the research group and they're paying you for working with them. Research internships are, as Saurjya mentioned, are not very frequently well funded. USA, in fact, it is close to impossible that you get any sort of funding unless you go on a scholarship or a fellowship. But Europe uh, is more likely. I mean, like there's stuff like GARD, and there's a Charpak Lab scholarship. Then there's an IST Austria Isternship, it's called. There are lots of internship programs, scholarship programs in Switzerland. There are three, in fact. Three, Think Swiss, and one more. I don't remember. So you get funding in Europe, but it's competitive. Yes, and so dates don't matter for internships or assistantships. Assistantships are completely different. Internships dates don't matter, and thesis is where the dates matter.
Right. Okay, so this was for internships. Now, Pratyush is asking, how difficult is it to get a scholarship or financial assistance for higher education in the UK?
I think Saurjya should go
Yeah,
first.
Saurjya or Deepak.
So, like for a PhD, like in my opinion, I think it's almost impossible to get assistantship from the UK, like funding from the UK if it's a master's or something. But for PhDs, if you don't have funding, it's extremely unlikely you'll get the position itself, unless you are like, okay, I have these many savings or Bangla hai mera chunchunu mein or something. So, like, if you bring so much money with yourself, then they'll be like, yeah, fine, you're not really costing anything to the university to host you. But for PhDs, it's quite easy, especially if you if you apply through the right programs, as I said, the CDTs and stuff. Yeah, for masters, I really don't know. I don't think there's much assistantship that you can get.
I would like to add here one thing. So, for example, for masters, yes, it's the case that in UK university, their endowment fund is relatively small if you compare it with US. For example, HBS endowment fund is in billions, and UK, like the one of the biggest university, I think the Oxford, they don't have that big of endowment fund, so they don't do that much scholarship because they can't, because of the small endowment funds. And yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons. But if you consider for in LBS, in London Business School, especially for MBA recently, our Kumar Mangalam Birla, he donated I don't know exact number, but a really good amount of money which can support 10 MBA students in perpetuity. Okay, like forever. Like so every year it can support tuition fees of 10 MBA students, and five would be from India, five would be from other nations. This was introduced recently, only like I think just 1 or 2 years back. And I have observed one thing, because it's related to Kumar Banglam Birla, it's related to BK Birla scholarship, like his grandfather, I think. Uh, I found like in the first scholarship as well, out of five Indians, there was one Bitsin. Last year also, like this year, this year intake also, there is also one Bitsin. And this like fully funded tuition fees. So that's around, we're saving around 1 crore. So yeah, that's for the LBS MBA, because Kumar Mangla did his MBA from LBS.
All right, great. That I think that answers it well for both masters and PhD. Moving on. Before that, one note to the ones watching this: if you want, there are 4 questions left. If you want to ask something else, you can drop it in the chat right now. If the time does not get elapsed, we can go with that question as well, or those questions. Uh, Next, Hemant has a question for Saurjya. Did you apply for the Qualcomm job off campus?
No, this was like day zero. Qualcomm came in as soon as I was back from my thesis. And yeah, I did not really prepare any competitive coding or anything back then, but just luckily, one of the people who was interviewing was the director of multimedia at Qualcomm. And he saw my profile and he's like, isko audio aata hai. So I had like a very easy interview process. And yeah, it was through PS, like PSD. Is it PhD? No, like placement PU. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, got it. Next question is for Harsh. So Adit asks, did you need any LORs to apply for internships?
Not for the cold mailing, but for my tax, you have a minimum of one, maximum of two LORs. For the USC Viterbi scholarship, you have two LORs minimum, and I can't think of any other. Yeah, no other scholarships that. If you're applying for MILA in Canada, MILA, there they do encourage you to send LORs, a minimum of one, maximum of three. So yeah, but I mean, you generally get LORs either through like you're doing really well on the course, which I wouldn't recommend to be honest. If you're going for a research internship, you should go for an LOR from a project supervisor, and then you probably have done a PS1 by the time you're applying, right? So try selecting, if you've not already selected yours, try selecting a PS1 wherein seniors have mentioned that okay, they do give you an LOR. Because CD, I selected CD because I thought if the project is good, the project was in theory was very good, but it wasn't a very good experience in terms of working, and they didn't give an LOR either. So try getting keep two LORs in hand. I would say by 3-1. Yeah.
Yeah, so while we're on the topic of LORs, Pratyush has a follow-on to that. When writing an LOR, a lot of profs ask the students themselves to frame one and forward it across for them to sign. So how frequent is this, and is this tolerable slash easily detectable by profs abroad?
Um, so at least for thesis in my case, knowing academics so far, this is somehow, I don't know if this is as popular outside of India, but this is like an extremely common thing that happens in India. And it's very easy for the professors to tell, unless you have like seen a lot of actual LORs from like academics and you are doing like some next level fakery. But yeah, I have heard this happen a lot to a lot of people applying for masters from my batch and my junior batches, and it's quite easily detectable. And if you can find a professor who's not literally asking you to write them an LOR for yourself, that's better. But also, word of caution, I have had situations where an academic did write a terrible LOR from bits for a student. So, and like they were not, and it has happened in IITs as well. So, just because someone is willing to write an LOR for yourself, like keep in mind the relationship that you have with them. Like, don't just blindly trust some, like, yeah, try to get an original LOR, but also keep in mind the kind of relationship that you have with them.
You're on mute, Kamal.
Yeah, I apologize. I
Yep.
did not pay attention. I was just asking that Deepak or Harsh, would you want to add something to that or any instances that you would want to share?
Again, I very well resonate with what Saurjya said. It's actually the case. It's very easy to find out if you are writing the LOR or if someone, a professional or an academic professor, is writing an LOR. But again, you need to consider the relationship you share with the professor or the professional you are asking LOR. So yeah.
All right. Great. So I think we can move on. We have three questions left. Uh, so Anshu Nair's question is, how much role do formal projects under professors play in getting an intern or thesis? And is it the same for personal projects? How probable is it for someone with no projects but decent grades to get an admit?
Okay. Formal projects obviously prioritized over informal ones. I mean, I had a lot of informal ones on my GitHub account, but I did not mention them in my email at all. Like I did link my GitHub account, but did not mention specifically that I've done that because I had formal projects. If I did not have formal projects, then yes, I would mention the informal ones because that's something you have to show as proof that okay, fine, you know what you're talking about. And with regards to what was the second part? If you don't have projects, whether getting a good GPA is enough,
Enough,
right?
yeah.
So for thesis, that's enough. In fact, like my thesis application, the guy just read my mail saying, "Okay, you want to do a thesis?" I'm like, cool. That's it. There was no further uh, discussion at all. But interns generally is because they're investing their time in you and they're not getting anything substantial out of it, 100 for sure. So you might want to have, along with a decent GPA, at least one or two projects for sure.
Okay, I I'm gonna skip over Yuvraj's question for a bit because Pratyush has a direct follow-up to what we just discussed. Uh, how how much do projects make up for a mediocre CGPA for master's applications? I think Deepak, you would be able to answer it better.
I think more than your projects, like if you're talking about your projects, like the professional background in the sense, like if you're working for a firm or if you are doing an internship, not related to an academic internship, but you're doing with some firm, some startup or anything like that, that definitely helps you. But yeah, in UK, the system is 2:1. So, and I know BitSense as well in LBS with CGPA around 7 or 7 plus, getting admission here. So it's not this like solely CGPA is not the solely criteria. They do look at your profile holistically, and yeah, I can vouch for that. So yeah, but obviously experiences do help. Uh, you can so if you're not best in one thing, you really do want to cover that thing with something else. So I think as Harsh mentioned in the beginning itself, you need to back up that thing with something else, right? So if you feel like your CGP is not that great, you want to back up with some good internship or really good LORs or something else.
Great, understood. Uh, so so Yuvraj had a question that we discussed a couple of minutes ago, that how how the funding works, and if there is no restriction on dates, how do when can you exactly do a thesis? So he has a continuation question to that. He's clarifying that he was talking about research assistantships after graduation. So could you please tell him about that? And this is again with respect to funding and dates.
To be honest, I'm not very well educated on the matter. Like I know that the process for application is similar to that of interns, that you cold mail and let them know that you'll be available for a year working with them on so and so date. But I'm not sure about the exact details of funding and dates. I think it's just usually like the same fall cycle, fall and spring semester together. So I think maybe Saurjya or Deepak can have a better idea on this.
So, regarding like a research assistantship after you graduate, expecting a funded research assistantship, unless you have like a very legitimate, like a publication or a relationship with the person who you are applying for a research assistantship under, uh, unless you have two of and like something that really adds value to you, you're at a serious disadvantage as compared to other PhD students or postdocs who might be applying for that funded research assistantship position as well. So it's quite unlikely. And also, for all the research assistantships that I have seen, uh, may it be after PhD or after a master's, they are usually from the smaller grants that I talked about, which are like grants that individual professors have. So they usually do not have fixed dates. It's like if they get a grant, they'll recruit someone in the next 3 months, and you have to be on top of those email chains and stuff like that to know when something shows up. Like it's not like an academic. It does not follow a calendar or anything.
Okay, Deepak, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think I'm good. Yeah, he pretty much covered everything. Yeah.
All right, so with that, I think the time has elapsed. It is 7:30, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for taking the time out. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a very constructive session for a lot of people. And since this is being recorded, I'm sure that many students are going to keep coming back to this and even those who missed it are going to come back to this to understand how the process works. And I'm very glad that you guys took out the time for this. It was a pleasure hosting you, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks so much,
for having
Carmen.
us.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us. Hope it was useful.
Cheers, man. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, see you.